The girl's sobs echoed through the cold, empty house, each breath trembling with despair. Her tiny fists pounded against the door as her stepfather's footsteps receded into the distance, leaving her alone in darkness. She clutched her stomach, hunger gnawing at her insides, tears streaming down her face as she begged, "Please, don't leave me. Please, don't leave me." But her words fell on deaf ears. The house was silent except for her ragged breathing and the muffled sound of her own crying. She sank to the floor, trembling, clutching her knees to her chest. The cold seeped into her skin as she remembered her mother's funeral. How they had all come, eyes filled with sorrow. Yet her stepfather had turned away, cold and distant. Now she was cast out, abandoned like trash, left to fend for herself in a world that felt so cruel and vast. She looked around the empty room, the shadows dancing on the walls, and felt the ache of her emptiness deep within her chest. Hungry, she searched through the dusty cupboards, finding only scraps of stale bread and a forgotten bottle of water. She ate them slowly, tears blurring her vision as she watched the food slip away. Her stomach clenched painfully, but she knew she had no choice. Each bite was a reminder of her helplessness, of how she'd been betrayed by the one person she trusted most. Her face crumpled in anguish as she whispered, "Why? Why did you leave me? Why did you throw me out? After everything." Night fell, and the darkness wrapped her like a shroud. She curled into a small ball on the cold, hard floor, clutching her tattered blanket. Her heart pounded in her chest, fear, loneliness, and pain blending into a suffocating weight. She cried out in desperation, "Please, someone help me," her voice cracking like glass. But no one answered. The house was silent, save for her desperate whispers and the distant echo of her own sobs. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. She froze, eyes wide with terror, clutching her blanket tighter. Was it her stepfather coming back? Or some nightmare come alive? Her mind screamed for help, but her voice was lost in the silence. She was utterly alone, abandoned by everyone she loved, left to face the darkness and her despair. Her stomach rumbled painfully again, and she pressed her tiny hand against it, feeling the emptiness. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her face gaunt and pale. Every moment was a new ache, a new tear falling, a new whisper of hopelessness. She begged in a trembling voice, "Please, someone, don't leave me. I'm so scared. I don't want to be alone anymore." Her voice faded into a whisper, lost in the vast silence that seemed to swallow her whole. As she curled tighter into herself, clutching her knees, her mind drifted into the darkness of despair. She wondered if anyone would ever hear her again, if anyone would rescue her from this nightmare. Her eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion pulling her into a deep, restless sleep filled with nightmares of rejection and abandonment. But just as her tears threatened to drown her completely, a strange stillness filled the air. A gentle, radiant light seeped into the room, illuminating everything with a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold darkness. The air grew soft and peaceful, as if the very shadows were retreating. And in that moment, something greater was about to unfold. A miracle that would change everything she thought she knew about hope, love, and salvation. The girl's journey to this moment was paved with heartbreak and betrayal that cut deeper than words could express. Just days ago, she had watched her mother's casket being lowered into the ground, feeling a void that seemed impossible to fill. Her heart was heavy with grief, and she clung to her mother's memory, seeking comfort in the only place she knew, her family. But that comfort was ripped away in an instant. Her stepfather, a man cold and distant, had arrived at the funeral with a look of disdain etched into his face. He barely acknowledged her, his eyes fixed on the ground or on the distant horizon as if she were invisible. Her stepmother, equally cold, offered no warmth, no words of condolence, only a flicker of annoyance that she had to deal with her stepfather's grief and her own. In the days that followed, everything changed. Her mother's death had left a gaping hole in their home, and instead of mourning together, the family split apart. Her stepfather grew more distant, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, and her stepmother's patience wore thin. They started treating her as an inconvenience, a burden that had to be pushed aside. She was told to stay out of the way, to stop crying, to be strong for everyone else. But she couldn't suppress her pain. Every night, she would sit alone in her small room, clutching a worn picture of her mother, tears streaming down her face as she whispered her goodbyes to someone she loved so dearly. Yet the worst was yet to come. One cold morning, her stepfather stormed into her room with a furious glare. His voice was harsh and commanding, devoid of any compassion. "You're nothing but a burden," he spat. "Your mother's gone, so you're useless now. Get out of my house." Her eyes widened in shock. She begged, trembling, "Please, I don't want to leave. I have nowhere to go. Please, don't send me away." But her words fell on deaf ears. He shoved her aside, ignoring her tears and desperate pleas, and she watched in helpless horror as he grabbed her few belongings, an old blanket, a small bag of clothes, and hurled her out into the cold, unforgiving street. She stumbled onto the pavement, clutching her belongings as her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The night was falling, and she was alone, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love her. Her stepmother had watched silently, her face devoid of emotion, as if her child's suffering was nothing more than an inconvenience. The girl's mind spun with confusion, betrayal, and rage. How could they do this? How could they cast her aside like she was nothing? She had lost her mother, her protector, and now her family had turned their backs on her completely. She wandered the streets, cold and hungry, her stomach aching from hunger and her soul aching from the injustice of it all. She had no one left to turn to, no one to comfort her, no home to return to. The world felt vast and terrifying, a place where love and belonging had vanished. Every step she took was heavy with despair, her small frame trembling from the cold and her tears. She begged silently, feeling the weight of her abandonment crushing her spirit. Why? Why did they leave me? Why did they throw me away like I was trash? Her voice was barely a whisper amidst the chaos of her heartbreak. Her innocence was stolen by the cruelty of those who should have protected her. The adults she had trusted, the ones who should have shielded her from pain, had instead betrayed her. Her stepfather, who once pretended to care, now was a stranger who had cast her out without a second thought. Her stepmother, silent and indifferent, had allowed her to be discarded without a fight. Her own mother was gone, leaving her with an emptiness that no words could fill. The injustice burned like fire inside her, fueling her pain and helplessness. And yet, amid that suffering, a faint whisper of hope began to stir. Something greater was about to happen. Something beyond her understanding, beyond her pain. She didn't see it yet, but a presence was approaching. A light shining through the darkness, ready to change everything. The injustice she endured, the suffering she bore. They were about to meet a divine intervention, a miracle that would remind her that even in the deepest darkness, hope could still emerge. The girl's trembling body told the story of a pain that refused to fade. She had been pushed out of her home like an unwanted possession, her small frame stumbling into the cold night with nothing but a tattered blanket clutched tightly around her. Her stepfather's furious voice still echoed in her ears, screaming, "Get out! Don't come back until you're gone forever!" As he shoved her roughly towards the door. Her tears blurred her vision, but she kept going, desperate to escape the rage and rejection that had become her daily reality. But the nightmare didn't end there. No sooner had she collapsed onto the cold pavement than her stepmother appeared, sneering with contempt. "You're nothing but a burden," she spat, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her back to her feet. "You think you're special? You're just a useless girl who's caused enough trouble. Leave," she hissed, shoving her away again. The girl fell to her knees, clutching her face as tears streamed down her cheeks, feeling more alone than ever. That night, starving and trembling, she wandered the empty streets, searching for shelter or kindness. Hunger gnawed at her insides, but she had no food, no home, no one to turn to. She was cold, shivering beneath the starless sky, her stomach aching for even a crumb. She tried to find a place to hide, but every alley was dark and dangerous. Her tiny hands clutched her stomach as she begged softly, "Please, someone help me. Please," her voice cracking with despair. Yet no one answered. No one cared. The next day, her misery deepened. Her stepfather, furious that she had survived the night outside, returned with a cruel smirk. "Looks like you're still alive," he said with mock surprise, then kicked her hard in the ribs. "You're a worthless waste. You're nothing but a burden to everyone." She crumpled to the ground, clutching her side, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pain was overwhelming, but worse was the look in his eyes. Cold, merciless, unforgiving. He spat on her, then turned away, leaving her trembling on the dirt. As if that weren't enough, her stepmother came later that day, this time with a twisted smile. "You think you're going to find kindness? You're not worth the trouble?" she sneered, kicking her aside and knocking her over. The girl fell hard onto the rough pavement, scraping her hands and knees. She cried out in agony, not just from the pain, but from the cruel rejection. Her hunger grew worse, her body weak, her spirit crushed under the weight of relentless cruelty. Every time she tried to stand, she was pushed back down, insulted, told she was useless, dirty, a stain on their family. Each moment her suffering increased. One evening, her stepfather returned, drunk and angry, slamming the door open and grabbing her by the hair. "You're a monster," he shouted, pulling her upright. When she begged him to leave her alone, he slapped her across the face, leaving a red welt. "You're nothing but a worthless girl," he spat, shoving her into the street again. She was thrown out like trash, her small body trembling in the cold, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her stomach rumbled uncontrollably from hunger, and her clothes were torn and stained. She tried to find somewhere to hide, somewhere to escape the relentless torment, but every attempt was met with more cruelty. The cold night, the hunger, the insult after insult, the blows, each one worse than the last, seemed to push her further into despair, into an abyss where there was no escape. She was a victim of neglect, of injustice, of cruelty so severe she wondered if anyone in the world cared. Her cries for help went unheard, her pleas ignored. Her heart ached with betrayal, feeling abandoned by everyone she loved, cast out into a universe that seemed to have turned its back on her forever. And just when it felt like she could endure no more, when her spirit was about to break completely, a stillness filled the air. A gentle, radiant light suddenly shone into her darkness, illuminating her battered face and broken soul. In that moment, she sensed something greater was about to happen. A miracle that would reveal that even in the deepest suffering, hope and salvation could still emerge. The pain was terrible, but the mercy that was coming would be greater than her suffering. Something divine was about to change everything. The girl sank to her knees on the cold, unforgiving street, her tiny hands trembling as they clutched her stomach, which twisted painfully from hunger. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one ragged and shallow, as if her lungs were struggling to find air in the suffocating darkness around her. The ache in her belly was relentless, a burning that made her wish she could just disappear. Her clothes were torn and stained, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes glassy and unfocused. The cold had seeped into her bones, causing her to shiver uncontrollably, her small frame trembling as if she might shatter into pieces. She looked up at the bleak sky, searching desperately for some sign of mercy, some sign that someone might see her suffering. But the emptiness stretched on, silent and indifferent. Her voice, weak and trembling, broke through her chattering teeth. "Please, please, help me," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Her voice cracked, filled with hopelessness and despair. She clutched her blanket tighter around her trembling shoulders, her body racked with shivers that refused to stop. Her eyes fluttered, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion, but she fought to stay awake, to stay alert for a sign of kindness in this merciless night. She wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but her throat was raw and hoarse from crying so much. She was exhausted from crying, from fighting, from being abandoned again and again. Every breath she took felt like a struggle, every heartbeat a reminder of her helplessness. Her mind spiraled in despair. How could they leave her like this? How could her own family betray her so completely? Her stepfather's cruel words, his violent push, echoed in her mind. "You're nothing, worthless, useless." The insult stung more than the bruises he had left. Bruises she couldn't see but felt deep within her soul. Her stepmother's cold stare haunted her as she had been kicked aside, told she didn't belong, dismissed like trash. She had begged for mercy, for kindness, but there was only silence, only the endless night that seemed to swallow her whole. Her stomach clenched painfully, twisting with hunger that made her dizzy, her vision dimming at the edges. Her limbs felt so weak, her head heavy, her eyelids fluttering as fatigue threatened to pull her into darkness. She wanted to scream for someone, anyone, to see her pain, but her voice failed her. No one came, no one heard. Her sobs turned into muffled whimpers, her cries swallowed by the cold, empty streets. She pressed her face against the cold pavement, trying to find some warmth from the ground, but it offered no comfort, only more despair. Her body shook uncontrollably, her teeth chattering so violently that she feared she might break her jaw. Her vision blurred, and she felt herself slipping into unconsciousness, her mind swimming with fear and loneliness. The feeling of abandonment was overwhelming, a crushing weight that pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wondered if she would ever find relief, ever feel safe again. Her tears continued to fall, streaking her dirt-smudged face as she whispered softly, Nobody cares. I'm all alone." Her voice was barely audible, lost in the vast emptiness of the night. Just when her strength seemed to be slipping away, just when she thought she could endure no more, the darkness threatened to take her completely. Her trembling body went limp on the cold ground, her head bowed in surrender. Her small hands fell away from her stomach, her eyes fluttering shut as exhaustion and despair took over. Her breath was shallow now, a faint breeze of life flickering in her fragile frame. She felt the cold seep into her bones, her eyelids heavy with the weight of exhaustion. The street was silent, her cries fading into the night, her suffering reaching its peak where it seemed no one could hear her anymore. And in that moment, just before the darkness claimed her, something extraordinary was about to happen. A presence, gentle yet powerful, was drawing near, shining through the darkness. The night's silence was about to break, and a light would pierce through her suffering. The greatest miracle was on the horizon, ready to change everything. The girl's small body was limp on the cold, unforgiving ground, her trembling frame overwhelmed by exhaustion, hunger, and pain. Silent tears carved streaks through dirt-smudged cheeks as she lay there, her eyes fixed on the darkening sky above. Her breath was shallow, each inhalation a fragile whisper of life slipping away. Her hands, trembling and weak, clutched her tattered blanket close to her trembling chest, as if holding on to some last fragment of hope. The cold had seeped into her bones, causing her to shiver uncontrollably, her teeth chattering so violently it felt as if they might break apart. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion, and her gaze drifted upward, searching the vast, indifferent sky for a sign, for a whisper of mercy. In that stillness, her lips moved softly, barely more than a whisper, as if speaking to an unseen presence. Her voice was trembling, almost inaudible, yet filled with desperate longing. "God, please, help me," she whispered, her words barely escaping her chapped lips. Her voice cracked into a sob, then faded into silence. She closed her eyes for a moment, surrendering to the weight of her suffering, to the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. Her tears continued to fall, silent streams of despair that no one would see or hear. The night stretched around her, cold and vast, as if the universe itself had turned away from her pain. A heavy pause settled over the scene, an almost sacred silence that seemed to hold its breath. Time itself seemed to slow, as if waiting for someone to intervene. The girl's trembling body lay motionless, her spirit barely clinging to life, her fragile hope flickering like a dying ember. The wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying her silent prayer into the vast emptiness above. Her eyes remained fixed on the dark sky, searching, pleading, longing for a sign that she was not forgotten, that her suffering was not in vain. Her breath was shallow, her heart pounding softly in her chest, yet her spirit was weary, exhausted from the relentless cruelty and abandonment she had endured. In that suspended moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The world held its breath, awaiting the inevitable end. Her small face, streaked with tears and dirt, appeared almost angelic in the darkness, fragile, vulnerable, and utterly alone. Her whispered plea hung in the air, barely a breath, a fragile cry for mercy in a universe that had so far ignored her pain. Her eyes fluttered open once more, gazing upward with a mixture of hope and despair, seeking a glimpse of divine intervention, a sign that her suffering was not unnoticed. Her lips moved again in a soft prayer, a plea for help, for salvation, for a miracle to break through the darkness. The night seemed to pause, as if holding its breath in anticipation. The silence was deafening, heavy with the weight of unspoken hope. The girl remained there, vulnerable and exposed, her body trembling, her soul reaching out into the unknown. Time stretched endlessly, each second echoing with the ache of her helplessness. Her silent tears continued to fall, a testament to her pain, her surrender, her desperate need for something greater than herself. Her prayer, soft and trembling, drifted into the night. "Please, if you are there, don't leave me. I'm so tired. I need you, please." And then, just as the darkness seemed ready to claim her forever, a stillness fell, a divine pause. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was to come next. Everything was about to change. The silence, the darkness, the despair. All were about to be broken by a presence so gentle, so powerful, that it would shatter the night's cold grip. The moment was suspended in eternity, on the verge of something extraordinary. Something that would prove that even in the depths of despair, hope could still ignite, and the impossible could become real. The girl's silent prayer was the last thing she could offer before the miracle of the unseen began to unfold. In that moment of utter silence, just as her trembling lips barely whispered their final plea, something extraordinary began to unfold. The air shifted soft, almost imperceptible at first, like the gentle breath of a breeze through a still forest. And then, slowly, a radiant light pierced the darkness, not blinding, but warm, comforting, like a sunrise after the longest night. The girl's eyes fluttered open, instinctively drawn to the luminous glow that seemed to fill the space around her, wrapping her in an embrace of peace she had never known. It was as if the universe itself had paused in reverence, holding its breath in anticipation. From the light emerged a figure, serene, compassionate, and radiant beyond words. His presence was gentle yet undeniable, filling the cold, empty space with an overwhelming sense of love and hope. His eyes, filled with kindness and understanding, looked directly into hers, as if seeing through her pain, her tears, her suffering, seeing her heart in its rawest form. He stepped forward slowly, with a calmness that calmed the storm within her soul. His voice, when he spoke, was tender but powerful, carrying a depth of compassion that seemed to reach into every broken piece of her heart. "Do not be afraid," he said softly, as if whispering directly into her spirit. "I am here. I have come for you." The girl's breath hitched, her trembling hands reaching out instinctively, as if to grasp the very hope that now stood before her. Her tears, which had once been silent and desperate, now turned into a mixture of awe and relief. Every fiber of her being recognized that this was no ordinary presence. This was something divine, something beyond her understanding, yet exactly what she needed. In that moment, the pain, the rejection, the loneliness, all began to melt away. The heaviness that had pressed down on her chest lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Her tiny voice, trembling with disbelief, broke through the silence. Who are you?" He smiled kindly, and in that smile, she saw the promise of hope, unfailing, eternal. "I am Jesus," he replied gently, "the one who comes to heal the broken-hearted, to give hope to the hopeless, and to carry the burdens no one else can bear." His words carried a divine authority, yet they were spoken with such tenderness that her heart could not help but believe. He reached out his hand, and she, trembling still, took it. The moment their hands touched, a wave of warmth flooded her entire being, an unexplainable comfort that seemed to seep into her very bones. It was as if the darkness had been pushed back, replaced by a light so pure and so full of love that it illuminated every shadow of her despair. His presence was like a balm to her wounded soul. Every fear, every ache, every tear that had once threatened to drown her, began to dissolve in the glow of his love. He knelt beside her, gently wrapping his arms around her fragile frame, offering a safe harbor amid the storm. "You are not alone," he whispered softly, "for I am with you now, and I will never leave you." Tears of relief streamed down her face, but now they were tears of surrender, tears of gratitude for the divine comfort that had arrived just when she needed it most. Her heart, once pounding with fear, now beat with a newfound hope, hope rooted deeply in his promise that love and mercy were never far away, even in the darkest times. The room, once filled with silence and despair, was now alive with a sacred peace. The girl felt her burdens lift, replaced by a gentle assurance that her pain was seen, her tears understood, and her suffering embraced with compassion. Jesus' presence was the answer she had longed for, a reminder that even in the depths of rejection and loss, love could still find its way. And as he rose to his feet, his gaze rested softly upon her. "Come," he said, offering her a hand once more. "There is hope beyond what you see now. I have come to bring new life, new beginnings, and the promise that no one is ever truly forsaken." In that miraculous moment, everything changed. Her despair transformed into hope, her loneliness into a profound sense of belonging. The divine had arrived, unexpected, yet precisely when she needed him most. Her silent tears now carried a different meaning, tears of relief, of gratitude, of a future made brighter by his love. The girl looked up at him, her heart swelling with a deep, unshakable hope. In her trembling voice, she whispered, "Thank you," knowing that her life would never be the same again. And in that sacred space, with her Savior standing beside her, she knew she had found the answer, the greatest comfort, the purest hope, embodied in his presence. In that quiet moment, when the girl's trembling figure looked up at the radiant presence of Jesus, everything seemed to shift. Her tears, which had once been silent and desperate, now carried a new weight, the weight of hope and undeniable truth. As his gentle gaze settled upon her, a wave of calm washed over her, filling her with a strength she had never known before. It was as if his love poured into her, flowing through every aching part of her soul, awakening a resilience that had been buried beneath pain and rejection. She felt her trembling hands steady, her fragile body find balance, and a flicker of courage ignite within her. Though her heart still carried scars of abandonment, She now carried an unshakable assurance that she was not alone. Her suffering had been seen, and something divine had intervened. Around her, the room that once echoed with silence and the cold indifference of the adults who had cast her out now seemed to shrink in the presence of this divine arrival. Her stepfather, standing nearby with a sneer of contempt moments ago, froze as if struck by an invisible force. His face, once twisted in anger and cruelty, suddenly drained of color. His eyes widened in shock, his jaw tightening as if he had been caught off guard by something far greater than his own wickedness. His lips parted but no words came out, only a stunned silence, as if the weight of his actions had been exposed in an instant. The cruelty he had wielded so easily now seemed petty and hollow against the overwhelming presence of love and mercy. The other adults in the room, if there were any, watched in stunned silence. Their expressions shifted from scorn or indifference to shame, silent but unmistakable. They saw the girl's trembling figure, broken and abandoned just moments ago, now standing tall with a renewed strength that radiated from the divine presence. Their eyes flicked to Jesus, whose calm authority and gentle compassion seemed to cast a light on their own darkness. In that moment, the shame of their cruelty was undeniable. Their silence was loud with the weight of guilt and regret. They had judged her, dismissed her pain, but now, faced with the undeniable proof of divine intervention, they were rendered speechless, ashamed in the face of true love and mercy. The girl, standing with her head held high, felt a surge of courage coursing through her veins. She looked at Jesus, her eyes shining with gratitude and newfound strength. The pain of rejection still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she clung to the hope that this divine moment had awakened within her, a hope that she was protected, loved, and valued beyond measure. Her trembling hands clenched into fists, not from fear, but from a fierce determination to face whatever came next. She was no longer invisible or forsaken. She was seen, cherished, and carried by a love that no cruelty could diminish. In the silence that followed, the atmosphere had completely changed. The room that once echoed with cruelty now trembled with the weight of divine truth. The shame and shock on the faces of the adults served as a silent reminder. Something profound had occurred here. The suffering she endured was not in vain, for it had led her to this moment of divine encounter, where love overcame hate and despair was replaced by hope. Her tears of pain had been transformed into tears of relief, and now she stood as a testament that even in the depths of rejection, something truly divine had intervened. Jesus' presence had brought more than comfort. He had brought a shift, a turning point that proved her suffering was not meaningless. It proved that mercy and love could pierce even the darkest hearts. The girl, feeling the strength of his love coursing through her, knew her life was forever changed. She was no longer powerless, no longer abandoned. Her suffering had prepared her for this moment, a divine declaration that she was precious, loved, and protected by the greatest love of all. The silence lingered, heavy with unspoken truth. The adults, now ashamed, looked away, unable to meet the gaze of the divine presence that had revealed their cruelty for what it was. The girl, standing tall beneath the gentle gaze of Jesus, felt an unshakable peace settle within her. She knew the suffering had not been in vain. Something truly had changed. Her heart, once shattered, now beat with renewed hope, and her soul, once lost in darkness, now shone with the light of divine love. The girl stood quietly, her trembling body now still, as the divine presence of Jesus gently enveloped her. The radiant light that had filled the room moments before softened into a warm glow, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. Her eyes, once filled with tears of despair, now shimmered with a quiet peace, a peace that seemed to settle deep within her soul. Her shoulders no longer sagged under the weight of rejection. Instead, they lifted with a newfound strength. Her face, streaked with dirt and tears, now carried a gentle calm, a reflection of hope restored. She took a slow, steady breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, and in that breath, she found a sense of safety she had long been deprived of. It was as if all the pain, all the hurt, had been gently set aside, replaced by a divine assurance that she was loved beyond measure, protected by a love that no cruelty could diminish. Her small hands, once clenched in fear, relaxed naturally, and she looked around, noticing that the shadows in the room had retreated. The silence that had once been heavy with cruelty now felt lighter, filled with the gentle whisper of hope. Jesus, the divine Savior, slowly stepped back, his presence still radiating peace and compassion. His eyes, full of kindness, looked at her one last time, and he offered a soft, loving smile. It was a smile that carried a message, one of love, of hope, of the promise that she was never truly alone. His voice, when he spoke, was tender yet powerful, echoing softly in her heart. "You are loved more than you can imagine," he said gently. "No matter what has happened, I am with you. You are precious in my sight." As he turned to leave, his words lingered like a gentle song in her mind. "Remember, even in your darkest moments, my love is always near. Trust in it. Hold on to hope, because with faith you can overcome anything." The girl watched as the divine figure slowly disappeared into the light, leaving behind an unshakable sense of peace. She felt safe, completely and utterly protected, her heart swelling with gratitude and newfound confidence. She was no longer the fragile girl cast out and broken by pain. She was a child restored, held in the love of the one who had come just when she needed him most. Her eyes, now bright with hope, looked toward the future. The scars of her suffering might still remain, but they no longer defined her. Instead, her heart was filled with a quiet assurance that she was cherished beyond measure. She took a step forward, her head held high, her spirit renewed. The pain had not disappeared overnight, but she knew she had encountered something divine. A love so pure that it had transformed her despair into hope, her rejection into acceptance, her shame into dignity. And as she moved away from that moment, she carried with her the message of love and hope that Jesus had left behind. A message that she would remember always, that she was never alone, and that divine love was always within reach, even in life's darkest valleys. Now, I invite you to reflect. In your own life, can you recognize moments when Jesus might be present, especially in your darkest times? Are there times when his love and hope quietly come to you, offering strength and comfort, even when you least expect it? The divine is not distant or only for special moments. It is near, waiting to be seen and embraced. So, ask yourself, have I opened my heart today to see his presence? Have I allowed his love to restore my hope? Because just as the girl found peace in her darkest hour, so can we all, if we believe, if we open our eyes, and if we trust that love is always near, guiding us through every storm.